Hello. Welcome to Working Wife, Happy Life. It is early 2020, and there's a lot of discussion about at which point, like which day do you stop saying Happy New Year to people? Is it different in a professional setting? Is it different in a personal setting? I'll admit at this stage in mid-January, it's getting a little awkward, but I feel like since it's a new decade, we could give a little more buffer time. So I'm going to just say Happy New Decade. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode, we sit down with one of my dear friends and a mentor for, as we discovered throughout the conversation, potentially over 20 years. And for those of you that don't know Fran, Fran Hauser is a longtime media exec. She's a startup investor, a keynote speaker, and most recently the best-selling author of The Myth of the Nice Girl, Achieving a Career You Love Without Becoming a Person That You Hate. I loved this book. I literally ran out of highlighter ink while reading it. Had to get a clean copy for Fran to sign because my book was such a mess. It's one of those timeless career advice books that is just helpful at literally any stage of your career. She's just such an incredible inspiration. She gives practical advice and has such a humanistic approach. She's also super peaceful. I find myself just mirroring her calmness when we talk. So I love every chat with her, and I know that you will too. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Fran. So you are my inaugural interview, which is so exciting because I feel like we have been on this journey together for like over a decade. I mean, the first time I met you was at that dinner.
Yes.
Where you were there as a client with time, and we did like a cooking thing.
Oh, that was so much fun.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
I do remember it.
Did we cook a pig cheek or something? There was something
sounds
pretty
right.
like awful, but
Yes.
also super interesting.
Super interesting. Exotic.
Yes.
But really fun. That was such a fun night.
Yeah.
So that was at least 10 years ago.
Yeah. I think it must have been. In fact, somebody just sent me a picture from 2006 of some coworkers and I was like, oh my God. I mean, we were babies.
Babies.
Yeah.
Babies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just been so fun to watch you grow in your career and now see this platform that you're launching.
Yeah, thank you.
Unbelievable.
Thank you.
So fun.
And I remember, through our entire kind of relationship and friendship, I always felt like I could reach out to you randomly, where there would be months or maybe years at a time that we didn't connect. And then I'd shoot you a note, hey, I'm thinking about this, or I'm struggling with this. And you always responded. And I can't imagine that I'm the only person that you have that type of relationship with. But I just feel like you had a really great way of providing guidance and a steer and, an ear in a way that just made me feel like you were kind of always there for me. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. My absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I'm so happy you're here with us. So you are coming off this huge success with The Myth of the Nice Girl, best-selling book, listed as top business book by Amazon. How has that been? Like, how has is it beyond what you expected? Is it what you were hoping for? Is it something that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's done? Kind of, how is your emotional state with that?
Well, I would definitely say it's beyond what I expected, both in terms of the amount of work that goes into it, not just writing the book, but then getting it out into the world, right? The all the talks and the events and it's also beyond what I expected in terms of the impact that it's had. It's just so fun to hear from women really all around the world who reach out, who have read the book, and who share with me how the book has impacted them. And, whether it's they gained the confidence to ask for a raise or, maybe there was a behavior that was holding them back at work that they've been able to really focus on. So for me, that's the joy. It's just really hearing from these women that the book has had an impact on their professional lives, which obviously also seeps into then your whole life, right? Your personal life. So it's been super exciting. It's almost 2 years. It came out April of 2018. I've done over 100 talks now.
Oh my God.
Over 100 talks.
That's
literally
insane.
I remember putting the marketing plan together and thinking, oh, I'll probably do like between 10 and 20.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize was how much interest there would be on behalf of companies to go in and speak to women's ERG.
Yes.
You know, to the women's kind of networking groups, like I
Yep.
did with Google,
Google,
and you,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that was the thing that really kind of surprised me. I kind of like expected that I would be speaking at women's conferences, and I've been doing that. But most of the talks have been inside of companies that are really looking to change their culture. They're looking for a culture that is more psychologically safe, that's more open, that's more transparent. And I think a lot of that stems from the Me Too movement, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in the world and culturally. But because of that, there's been a lot of interest for me to go in and speak. So it's just been so much fun, like meeting all of these really great people, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it sounds exhausting, but I think to me the biggest message is that you're giving people permission to be themselves and to do things that feel good to them while also, succeeding in their career. And I'm just curious, like, how did this come to be? When was the moment that you had the chutzpah to say, I'm going to write a book. I can do this. And were there moments of doubt? Was there imposter syndrome? Like, tell me about the personal process.
Well, I was toying with the idea for a while. I was thinking about, oh my gosh, this probably goes back to, 2009, 2010, because I remember I was at People magazine. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, I really want to write a women's leadership book. I didn't know exactly, though, what aspect of women's leadership, but I had this idea of like, wow, I'm a mentor to so many women. Mm-hmm. I'm giving advice all the time. And so I started thinking about it then. Then I had my first child. So the book kind of went on the back burner. Mm-hmm. And then a year and a half later, second child.
Oh, gosh.
And then I would say it was probably like 2014, 2015 where I came back to it again.
Yeah.
And I had different ideas. Like one idea was I was thinking about writing a book on mentoring, but then I realized that there's so many books out there on mentoring, mm-hmm. and I didn't really have a unique, fresh perspective to offer.
Yeah.
That could fill 200 pages.
So it's
right?
also different being passionate about something versus having enough passion to write a book about it. Two very different things.
It's a lot. It's 60,000 words.
Oh,
think about that.
Yeah.
When you're writing, a nonfiction book, like it's a lot of content. So with mentoring, it's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe that's like a blog post and not a book.
Right.
And so I had a few different ideas like that. And then here, really what happened was sort of the tipping point was when I did write this blog post actually on nice girls finishing first. Mm-hmm. And I wrote that blog post for Forbes back in it was early 2016. And the response to that blog post was incredible. It ended up being one of the most popular posts in their mentoring series. Awesome. And I started hearing from women all around the world who basically shared with me that, they were struggling with this idea of if I'm too nice at work, I'm thought of as a pushover, but then if I'm too tough, I'm thought of as the B word. So it's a struggle. It's really a struggle for women in terms of, how do I show up at work in a way that's authentic mm-hmm. and effective? Mm-hmm. And it was that moment, Bethany, because I had heard from women in my network that they were struggling with this, but I guess I feel like it needed to be validated by women that I didn't know. Once I started hearing from random women that this was something that they were struggling with, and I knew that this was something I could write about because it's the way that I lead. I lead with authenticity. I've always been the nice girl. I figured out a way to be nice at work and, still be effective. So it was sort of this combination of there's market demand, right? Mm-hmm. There's a need for this book. I think I'm the right person to write it.
Yeah.
And it also, from a timing perspective, it was just before the presidential election.
Yes.
In 2016.
Okay.
So there was a lot of dialogue around nasty women, and then when they go low, we go high. Yep. And it was very much in the ether.
Yeah.
So culturally, it was just really the right moment. So that was the moment where I was like, okay, this is the book that I'm going to write. And it kind of took all of those different pieces, though, to align.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. And it's I mean, just you saying I am the nice girl and I've managed to succeed in my career, and you've obviously had a very successful career both with, the publishing and digital media world as well as on your own. And I'd love to talk about that in a little bit, but I do think, the having known you for as long as I have and having had as many of these types of conversations as we've had, you are one of the most optimistic, calming personalities that I've been around. Just very positive. Is that part of is that just who you are? Is that how you were raised? Is that who you've become as you've done this research? How did that become who you are?
I believe that I've always been that person. I've always been the positive, optimistic, kind, empathetic, calming. Like that's just really who I am. I have to say, that's my mother. Like when I think about my mother, all of those qualities, that's her. So, she had 4 kids. I'm the oldest of 4.
Oh, wow.
And my parents moved to the United States from Italy when I was 2. So I was born in Italy, and then we moved to Westchester County, which is right outside of New York City. And if you can imagine, I mean, they came over. It was typical, no money, not speaking the language, and they both started small businesses. My dad started a stonemasonry and landscaping business, and my mother was a tailor.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up spending really a big part of my childhood working with them and helping them and being their translator and being a general manager really for their businesses. Like when I was in first grade, I was doing all of the invoicing for my dad's business.
That's
literally
crazy.
Literally. And I mean, I literally remember that, I would write like monthly maintenance, like for landscaping, monthly maintenance, $300, and then sales tax. I couldn't multiply. I could add.
I was going to say,
but I couldn't
spell maintenance in first grade itself is.
But my aunt actually created this like table for me. So like if it's $300, the sales tax is this amount.
Wow.
And then I was able to add the two. I mean, literally, I was doing this in first grade.
That's amazing.
But my parents, like just having that time to be not just their child, but also to actually work with them.
Yeah.
And I think I really, a lot of who I am today, a lot of these characteristics that you talk about, they're characteristics that I see in them.
Yeah.
Right. So they were really my first mentors.
Sure.
Yeah. So I got a lot of it from them.
That's fascinating. I mean, first of all, that whole story is fascinating. I am fascinated by birth order theory. So I'm the youngest of 3. And I'm always curious where people fall in terms of their birth and kind of how that informs, their interpersonal relationships, their work relationships, how they approach the world. My husband's an only child, so I'm always fascinated by this stuff. And that is, it just makes a ton of sense now, knowing you and knowing that. And I am also Italian, but I have a completely different type of approach where I'm much more fiery, and I feel like I lose my temper, and I just have much less calm in my being than I notice what you have. And I think it's such an incredible gift to kind of have that approach. So, and it actually comes through in your writing. So when I was reading your book, and knowing you could hear the words coming out of your mouth, it kind of reads like you speak. But when I spoke about kind of giving permission for these approaches before, there's a calmness to the delivery of how you guide or offer tips to the reader. And I think one story that sticks with me in particular, and you talk about this a lot, is this kind of notion of stop saying I'm sorry. And particularly for a nice girl, that's something that, I think we're raised and socialized to sugar and spice and just make sure that you're making everyone feel good around you. And so when you can't do something for somebody, you should be sorry for that. Tell me about that journey and your history with that word.
So that story actually ended up being one of the most popular stories in the book. And it was such a little kind of add-on. at the end of the book writing process. So I'm so happy that we covered it because it's clearly something that a lot of women are struggling with. So for me, the story is that a colleague of mine actually at Time Inc. called me out on apologizing. And I didn't realize that I was doing it as much as I was. So she just said to me one day, she's like, Fran, you apologize a lot. And I didn't believe her. So I went into my inbox and typed the word sorry into the search field in my inbox, and literally hundreds of emails came back. And I read every single one of my emails. And what I realized was that I was apologizing for really trivial things. Like it took me more than 4 hours to get back to someone, or I couldn't make an event. And each email started with, I'm so sorry. And what I found when I was writing the book, because we looked into some research, is that women do tend to apologize more than men. And when we're apologizing for things that are trivial, it makes us look weak, right? Yeah. We come across in a way that is not strong, is not confident.
Well, it's not only the perception of it, but it's how it makes you feel, right? So you are putting yourself in a position that you've done something wrong, and that's how you're starting that communication.
Exactly. That's literally how I was starting the email, is I have done something wrong, right?
Yeah.
And which obviously in hindsight, I look at that and I'm like, that makes absolutely no sense, right?
Yeah.
But so in that moment, I knew I had to change. Talk about like breaking a habit, right?
Yeah.
This is probably a habit that I started when I was a young girl, right? I'm sure. So it took me a while to break it, but a couple things that I did was I actually downloaded a Chrome extension called Just Not Sorry that alerts you every time you use the word sorry or any kind of speech weakener. And I actually did that for about a year. And it was my little like ding, ding, ding. So I could be thoughtful and reread the sentence and say, look, some things we should be apologizing for if we've hurt someone or right. I mean, it's like, but
that's a whole nother
that's
episode.
like a whole other episode. But I wanted to make sure, is this really the intention of what I'm trying to say? Is it I'm sorry? So I did that. I also asked my friend who called me out on apologizing to be my accountability buddy at work. I'm like, because we were in so many meetings together, and literally we would sit right next to each other, and she would kick me under the table if I was doing it.
Love it.
So it was something that I just really became determined. It was a habit that I became determined to break, and I feel like I was able to do that. Like, and there are other words, like the one that I still struggle with is just, especially in an email, like just
I just want to check in. Yeah.
Just following up. I mean, it really diminishes the importance of the rest of the sentence.
Yes.
There's no reason.
Yeah.
Just drop it. See,
Yeah.
just like, so that's one word that I kind of still struggle with a little bit. And so much of it is just being aware, right? Being aware. Like, are there words that you're using that aren't productive?
Yeah.
They're not making the sentence any stronger, and they're just words that you probably should remove from your vocabulary.
Right, from your like go-to. Now you're going to make me cognizant of it as we're talking. But
I know.
It's it's funny because I feel like every time we meet for coffee, I'm always 10 minutes late. I like to say it's hereditary, but and I'm always cognizant that when I get to you, I'm like, sorry, I'm late. And I'm like, oh, I can't say sorry to Fran. It's just one of those things. But it's like you said, it's creating that awareness where you're not diminishing your message. You're still being authentic. You're still getting your point across, but you're not putting yourself in a position to either feel or be perceived as less than what you're actually bringing.
That's right. Absolutely.
And those are the little tips that, I think are so important. There's another section of the book around setting boundaries, which I know a lot of people struggle with, right? There's boundaries in your personal life. There's boundaries in your professional life. There's boundaries on social media. There's boundaries on eating habits. All of these things that we're trying to figure out, how do I optimize every piece of my life? And that really resonated with me. Is that a topic that you've given a lot of thought to?
I have, and I continue to give a lot of thought to that topic. What I found is that often we say yes to things in a very kind of knee-jerk sort of way. An email comes in asking us to attend an event or asking us to take on a task, and we automatically say yes. We don't even like stop to reflect. and to think through, be strategic, be intentional about, is this something that I should be doing? Is this going to help me develop in my career? Is this something that's going to add a lot of value to the company? Is this something that I really enjoy doing, that I want to do?
Like, what's the ROI?
Like, what's the ROI? What is the ROI for you in saying yes? And I've been through periods in my career where I'm really bad at that, where yes, yes, yes. And it's for lots of different reasons. It could be people-pleasing related. It could be FOMO related.
Yeah.
It could be that I actually, I like achieving things. I like saying yes and then being able to check it off the list. Like, there's so many different reasons. The challenge is that when we take on this load, right, when we take on these tasks that are not really valued by the company, they're not helpful to you in terms of getting promoted, in terms of maybe getting a salary increase, in terms of investing in your own personal growth and development, growing your network, right?
Yeah.
So just being really thoughtful about like the things that we're saying yes to. Like you
also
and I were
personal
and personal
right?
too.
Like, I
Personal
mean,
too.
so I had a coach once tell me, figure out what you can say yes to and what you can say no to, and put it in a bucket, almost like you picture the old school like folders on the desk, in and out, right? Yes and no. And the impact of it is not only have you decided what you'll say yes to or no to, so life isn't necessarily happening at you, but once you put it in that bucket, you're done. It's like once you've found the wedding dress, you don't keep shopping. You're done. So you've just made this decision, like, when there's the personal stuff, like the kids' school concert that's happening at noon for 5 minutes, which is not convenient for anyone to get to. I'm going to say no to that one.
Right.
But I'm going to say yes to the
Right.
breakfast for Thanksgiving or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like finding those ways where you determine the balance and or the things that we do sometimes, we're both moms, and the things we do sometimes for our children that I'm certain they don't notice. And is that valuable? Does it make me feel like a better mom? Then okay, I'll do it. If I'm doing it because I'm expecting them to say when they're 35 and sitting down with their friends, my mom was wonderful because she did X, Y, and Z, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the one thing, being a mom, I remember when my first child started kindergarten, I was just so overeager to get involved in everything. And it took me a while to realize that when I look at all the volunteer opportunities at school, the things that are really going to move the needle for me and my kids are the opportunities where I get to spend time with them in the classroom. Or maybe it's doing the book fair because they love coming to the book fair and they can spend time with me at the book fair. It's not necessarily like the fundraising stuff that you're doing, at home that, where you're not going to be able, or maybe you're meeting in committees, but you're not spending time with the kids.
You're not interacting, right.
So it's for me, that became my filter to decide what I'm going to say yes and no to at school, like for volunteering, right?
And everybody's balance is different.
Everybody's balance is different.
Yeah.
And you can apply this with your girlfriends, with your work, with your, right? Like, when am I going to say yes? When am I going to say no? And the other thing, too, that you and I have talked a lot about is how men are just so much better at saying no.
Yes.
Right.
Unapologetically.
They just say no. They don't over-explain. They don't write a 2-paragraph email, which is like,
they don't worry about it before they write that 2-paragraph email.
Yeah, and they don't worry about it after, It's just like, no, I can't make it. So I think there's something to learn from that. And this is the nice girl speaking, by the way, right? Like, it's still, you can say no in a nice way.
Right.
And I really believe that this is something we all have to get better at doing, because I have so many friends girlfriends especially, that are burnt out right now. And it's just too much. They're not happy. They're very emotional. Yeah. And it's, they feel like they're not getting anything right, any part of their life. They feel very out of sync. So a lot of that goes back to like, okay, where am I going to spend my time? Like, knowing what are you protecting when you're setting boundaries? What are the things that really move the needle for you and for your family and for the company? What are those things? Those are the things that you are going to want to protect and set boundaries around.
And also, what are the things that are really for you, right? Versus what, I'm being told I have to do because that's what looks good on Pinterest when it's school snack day. And my kids are older, so I'm a bit beyond some of this stuff in terms of the school involvement, especially with my oldest, who won't even let me get near the school when I drop him off in the morning. But it's there's something to this pressure of perfectionism, this pressure of what we should be involved with, what we should be saying yes to. And again, what I think is so important about your message is this permission that if we start to all become so uniform, the world will get a lot less interesting. We will continue to be a lot less happy. Women suffer from mental health issues at a rate of 2 times that of men, which I'm guessing is probably just an underreported issue, that a lot of men are not seeking the mental health that they need because of the stigma surrounded it. But again, that's another episode. But I think that it's really important to allow ourselves this time to determine, going back to what is the ROI for me? What is important to me, not what I'm told is important.
That's right. And taking that time. Sometimes it's 2 minutes. Sometimes it's just reading an email, and instead of just responding, yes, I'll do this, it's taking a couple of minutes and thinking about, like, what does this really mean if I say yes to this? Because here's the other thing. Everything always ends up taking longer than you think it's going to take. So,
particularly writing a book, right?
Particularly writing a book, right? But you know this, right? I mean, everything, it's like so you think this could be something that's only 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It can end up being 2 hours. And, time is really precious. And I'm just all about how do we create more space in our calendars so that we're not in autopilot. Like I love talking about recurring meetings at work, because I feel like we all have these recurring meetings that we sit in that often they're not productive. And even just asking, like, is this something that we need to meet on every single week? If it's a new product launch, or maybe it's, I don't know, some, culture initiative or cost cutting. But is this something that we need to meet on every week, where everybody just goes around the room and gives an update on what, like, so just challenge, like when you look at your calendar and you look at the meetings that you're in, really challenging yourself. Like, is this the best use of my time?
Yeah.
Is it the best use of the team's time?
Yeah.
Because there's just nothing more important, I believe, than giving people time back so that they can spend that time creating and really, doing things that make an impact on the company, on the world, for themselves, for their family. Like, none of us have enough time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like we also, as leaders, and certainly both of us being at later stage or mid stage of our careers, I guess, I find so often when I'm in one of those meetings where it's just not valuable and it's a waste of people's time and nothing's getting taken care of, that if you can just step up and say it for the room, just say, you know what, this is not productive, or this could have been an email, not a meeting. You will have, particularly women, so grateful that somebody, who has a little bit more or less to lose, I guess, in some ways, has made that statement that they're all thinking. And that is like leadership.
That's leadership, and you will be a hero, because you are absolutely expressing something that everyone is thinking. And especially if you're later stage in your career, right? You have a little bit more gravitas, you have a little bit more political capital. Frankly, you're just more confident. You have more of a track record. It's like, what do I have to lose?
Yeah.
So I do think that we have a responsibility as leaders to step up and make those kinds of suggestions, because think about the time. If you have 20 people in that meeting, that's 20 hours. I mean,
it's just so expensive.
It's so expensive.
That's one of my things. I'm always like, this is a very expensive meeting right now.
Very expensive.
Yep.
Right.
So
I talk about how when I was at Time, I had 8 direct reports at one point, and I was doing one-on-one meetings, with each of them every single week. And while from a relationship perspective, I loved spending time with them, but I also found that those meetings were sort of like a regurgitation of, oh, here's what's on my to-do list, and here's how I'm doing on each thing. And I just felt like, I trust you. I'm sure that you're on top of all of this. And I decided I don't really need to do these weekly check-ins that are individual. We could instead just do a staff meeting.
Yeah.
So 8 hours got shrunk down to 1 hour.
Oh, it's amazing.
And
It's
what
an
I
entire
said to, it's
day.
an entire day. And what I said to everybody is, guys, look, if there's a really big opportunity that you want to talk about, or if there's a big obstacle, that's in your way, get on my calendar, and we'll spend 30 minutes or whatever time we need specifically focused on that. That's productive.
Yes.
Versus just sitting there
100%.
listening to you go through your to-do list.
Right.
And I think it was also like a sigh of relief for them because guess
totally.
what? It wasn't just an hour for them because they had to prepare for their meeting with me.
There's nothing like going into a one-on-one being like, oh my God, what am I going to
What am I going to talk about? And then and then the next steps and the follow-up
Yeah.
from the meeting. So it's 2 hours.
Now, on the
for
flip
each of the
side,
people.
with therapy, I feel like when you're going into a therapy session and you don't know what you're going to talk about, they tend to be the best sessions
I
ever.
agree. Oh my gosh.
But at
totally agree.
work, it's like the angst and
The
like all this
angst.
stuff. And it morale, too. Like, why are we going through these motions? Like,
No.
we're human and we don't need to be kind of stuck in these little boxes and these walls and these habits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think I would love to hear a bit more because you've had such a variety of roles in your career, both in startups and in established companies, and probably being at some of those companies when they went from startup to established. What are some of like the milestone moments in your career, like thinking of your mid to late 20s and then what was your 30s like and on, kind of how you showed up as a professional and as an individual?
Well, I would say my first milestone moment was when I left Coca-Cola to go to Moviefone because
Moviefone.
Coca-Cola was like literally the world's most admired company.
Yeah.
I was leaving that company to go to this early stage, at the time it was 777 Film.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
1997, I want to say. And Moviefone was just about to like go online and sell, movie tickets for the first time were going to be sold online. And I remember the reason why it was so appealing to me to go to a company like Moviefone was when I was at Coke, I was really in a financial role. And I wanted to become more of a general manager. I saw myself like running a business. And I felt like if I stay at Coke, which is this huge company, it's really hard to not be seen as the financial person and, maybe to kind of like bounce around and try marketing or operations so I thought, if I go to an early stage company, there's just going to be more flexibility and it's a little bit more kind of like roll up your sleeves and get involved, in everything.
Yeah.
And I remember having this conversation with the founders of Moviefone and saying that, like, look, if I leave Coke, it's going to be because I want exposure to different areas. Like, I'll come in as the SVP of finance to
Right.
Moviefone, but I really want to get exposure to different areas because eventually I want to be running a business. And they were able to do that for me.
That's
And
awesome.
I
Yeah.
think people at Coke thought I was crazy. I remember the CFO of the Coca-Cola company calling me and saying, where are you going? I don't even know this company that you're going to. And
Yeah.
if you stay at Coke, you can be the CFO one day. And I just remember it was really a difficult conversation because I just remember thinking, wow, I'm leaving this very stable situation, working for this company that's very well known, that's very respected, that looks great on my resume, that, I can see a very clear path to CFO.
Yeah.
And going to this kind of startup where I feel good about the founders. I liked the, kind of my vibe with them. But it was scary.
Risky,
it was really, really scary and really, really risky. But I also felt like, I was in my late 20s. I'm like, if I'm going to take I wasn't, I didn't have kids yet. Like, I just felt like this is the time. Like, if I'm going to take a big risk,
Yeah.
and like, what's the worst case scenario, right? What's the worst thing that could happen? It doesn't work out. I'm sure I could go back to like Coke or like a different company. And it was, it was amazing. It was the best thing I could have done.
It's such a great question to ask yourself. Like,
Right,
what is the worst that's going to happen?
What's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Yeah.
I mean, really think about what is the worst possible thing that could happen, and can I live with that? Right? Can I live with that? Am I going to be okay if that happens?
Right.
And I really felt like, look, I have a great support system, family,
Yeah.
friends. So I I'm really glad I did it. Moviefone ended up getting acquired by AOL. And this was before the dot-com bust. So like got out just in time. And the founders ended up retiring, and I ended up running Moviefone as a division of AOL. And that really got me into media,
Maybe
and
that's where we met.
I wonder if we met. I was
running the
through.
AOL account, so that's maybe how we met.
I think you're right.
Oh
It
my
wasn't
God.
timing. I think it was when I was at AOL.
Well, you've known each other a long time when you're talking about
So
two
that's like
companies
20 years
that are
ago.
under,
But if I hadn't made that move, it wouldn't have gotten me into general management. It wouldn't have gotten me into media. So many great opportunities started opening up because of that. And I think that was a big moment. The other moment that was also, pivotal for me was launching people.com at Time Inc. because really taking a legacy print brand and transforming it digitally, right? I mean, really, people.com, when I first started working on people.com, I think we had 5 people working on that website, and in 3 years, we were at 90 people working on that website, and it was one of the 10 most profitable businesses at the company out of 200 businesses after 3 years.
Good for you.
So what was amazing about that, the reason I like talking about that is because really think about the value that you're creating for the company that you work, or whether, if you work for yourself. I mean, being able to say that I was part of that team that digitally transformed this legacy brand and created a lot of ROI for the company, right? And I think I started becoming known for that. And that's when, then I was given InStyle and Entertainment Weekly, and I just kept taking on more and more brands. But it's like, what do you want to be known for? And really accomplishing something. Like I speak to a lot of young founders who have gotten so much press attention and so much social media attention, and I say to them, but they haven't really accomplished anything yet. It's kind of fascinating, like that's the world that we live in now.
I was going to say that's the world that we live on. You can have these platforms being built that are not known about by anybody, and then you can have these huge social media presence where it's like, but where is the foundation?
Where's the foundation? And I really do. I give them the advice, like, you need to be known for something. Like you need to actually accomplish something, something that you can be really proud of, that you can be known as the person who built that or transformed that. Or, so it's not just about, I don't want to say it's smoke and mirrors, but it's there needs to be substance. There needs to be some meat. It can't, you're not going to be able to get through your whole entire career without actually accomplishing something. This sounds so basic, right?
But I was thinking before when you were talking about your move from Coca-Cola too, is it sounds like it was a very intentional thing of this is what I want to achieve, and sometimes that intention becomes clear in hindsight versus at the time. Well, it sounds like you very specifically were like, this is the what I'm looking for. I look at the moves in my career and sometimes I'm like, oh, that's an interesting story. I'm not sure I necessarily thought about it as intentionally as it seems now.
Right.
And so until you have that perspective, it's really hard to, kind of get the authenticity or the trust that you deserve if you haven't kind of gone through the experience. Deserve is a weird word, but you know what I mean.
No, I totally believe that. I always say, like, the more experiences that you have, like, the more you put yourself out there, the more you try different things. I just feel like the more you do that, truthfully, the more failures you're going to have, which is great because everybody says you learn the most from your failures.
You do.
1,000%. Yes. So I think that's really positive. And then the other thing, too, is, when you talk about intuition and gut, your gut and your intuition gets stronger with the more experiences that you have, right? It takes a lifetime to give you wisdom, right? Like that whole thing. I really believe that. I think about when I first started in my career, I didn't have an informed gut, right? Because I was just starting.
Right. Where you have no litmus yet. You're still trying to, formulate.
You're formulating, you're testing, you're trying. Whereas I do think now, because we're in later stages of our career, you can go with your gut a little bit more.
Yeah. And you're less, I mean, it's just the age-old story of women as they age too, and I guess men too, but you just become more sure of yourself and more sure of the things that you're saying and doing. And I think that is such a relief. It's just such a relief to just have those moments where you're like, I just don't give a shit.
And feeling like you don't have to care or you don't have to prove anything. Like, because, you know, you kind of feel like, you know, I've already proven myself, right?
Yeah.
I have to say, Brene Brown, I heard her speak at the Conference for Women recently, and she gave the most amazing talk about just being okay with not caring. You don't have to care about everything. Yeah. By the way, this goes back to setting boundaries.
Yes, totally.
Right? Like
totally.
It's okay to say, you know what? I don't really care about that.
Yeah.
That's not something that's important to me.
Yes.
Right? And so and I do believe the older you get, the more confident
you can, and the less that people expect from you. It's almost like I had somebody describe it to me once, where as you age, you know, the check boxes are getting cleared off, right? You probably know who your partner is going to be. You get to our age, you know how many children you're going to have. You know where you're going to live. You know, there's some surprise. There's just fewer surprises or fewer unknowns. And there's, you know, certainly there can be a monotony, or if you're not happy, that's unfortunate when those things start to close off. But there's also like, yeah, I got this whole foundation of life and things that are where they should be. And so this is the stuff that I'm just like, just shave it off. I don't need it.
Right.
And it's a really powerful thing. But harnessing how you do that and finding a way, if we can get particularly women into that space even earlier, is such a relief, particularly in your like 30s when you're starting your families and you feel like you're pulled in a million different directions. And that's where I think your book really comes in and your message really comes in about, you know, during these changes, how do I get into a faster set of that foundation?
Yeah, no, it's such a great point. And sometimes I do think that we were talking about this earlier. It takes, like for me, it took having my first child to really get clear about boundaries and how I work and how I operate and like setting those boundaries. And I wish that I had focused on it even earlier in my career, you know, like just this idea of like, because obviously after I had my child, I had to make sure that I was creating the time and space for him, right? And I was getting out at a good time and I wasn't staying too late and all of that. But I wish that I had applied that to myself even earlier. Because I'd done a little bit more self-care, you know, like given myself just more time to take care of myself or spend time with girlfriends or right, as opposed to like going all in on the job. Right. And you know, like anything, there's ups and downs with that. There were probably periods where I was better at self-care and spending time with my girlfriends and my partner, and but then there were other periods where I was just like all in professionally, you know. So it's thinking about how you want to show up, thinking about how you want to set boundaries. It's never too early to start creating good habits around those things.
You're reminding me of a story of a friend of mine who she's the breadwinner in her family, and she runs an ad agency, and they were running a campaign. They were at work very late at night, and a younger guy on her team said to her, you know, how many more late nights are we going to have this week? And she was like, I you know, we have a campaign. We're trying to get this out. I don't know. And he said to her, I had a good laugh. He said, well, you know, it's easier for you because you have kids and my wife is just home by herself. And we had a really good laugh about this. But we had this moment.
Priceless.
She's like, if she's bored, she could go home and help my husband with my 2 children.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
But now I'm thinking about it from his perspective, and it is kind of a lovely thing where, you know, men obviously don't have as hard a time setting boundaries, but a lovely thing that he is setting those boundaries for himself this early in his career. But the
the way that it came
It was
across.
communicated.
Oh,
It's like, oh,
gosh.
really? Is she just sitting there having dinner
She's just
watching
sitting
TV?
there.
That sounds awful. You know, it was so great.
That's great.
Classic. Well, thank you so much. This has been fantastic to spend the morning with you, and I look forward to all that you do, and I hope that you come back and join us again.
Oh, Bethany, this was amazing. Congratulations
you.
on this.
Thank
You're
you.
incredible.
Oh.
So it's such an honor to be your first guest. Thank you for
Yes.
having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is going to be a really unique and thought-provoking ride for all of us. I'm so excited to explore the many facets of what it means to be a breadwinning woman with you. There's a ton of conversations coming up that are going to give you inspiration and leave you feeling hopeful and understood. Don't forget to jump over to Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast and hit the subscribe button. And please leave us a review to give us some direct feedback and also to get the podcast in front of more eyes. It's very much appreciated. Until next time.